Hello and welcome back. We're going to continue polynomial long division with a couple examples. This is in section A.3. Now I made up a couple examples that may have a little bit different, we may have to do a little bit different things with working with it. In this case I'm looking at the exponents of this term that we're dividing, x to the fourth minus 2x cubed plus 4x minus 5. If you look at the powers, 4, it drops from 4 to 3 to 1 to no power of x. We're missing a term here. So when we do the long division, I'm going to leave a little space for that x to the third or x to the second that I don't have. So this is going to be a little bit different than the first one I did on the first example because we're missing an x squared term. So the two examples I'm giving you today on this is they're going to have a little bit different setup because of what we're dividing by, or in this case we don't have any x squared terms, so I'm going to put a 0x squared here plus 4x minus 5. So I'm keeping a place value for that term, an x squared. I'm thinking that I might get an x squared out of this long division. If I don't, I can just skip it and move on if I don't have an x squared there when I do this division. So let's start with the first term here. We're dividing by x again. So let's start with the x to the fourth term. That's our first term. We're going to divide by x. So that's going to be x to the third. So our first term up here is going to be x to the third. We're going to multiply these both by x to the third, and we're going to get x to the fourth plus x to the third. We're then going to subtract these as we did in a long division and as a previous example. So these are going to be gone. X to the fourth terms are going to be gone. We're going to have a negative 2 here and actually a minus 1 here. So we're going to get negative 3x squared, or x cubed, negative 3x cubed. We're going to bring down the next term, which is the 0x squared, because I think that we're going to get an x squared on this next term. So if we take our term, that's our negative 3x cubed, we take this first term, we divide it by our first term here, we get negative 3x squared. So that's our next term up here, negative 3x squared. So when we divide, we distribute this thing over both of those. So we multiply negative 3x squared times x. So we get negative 3x cubed. Negative 3x squared times 1 is going to be negative 3x squared. And we're going to subtract. So we did have an x squared there. It was good that we kept that place. We subtract this negative. This changes to positive. So it's going to drop out. We're then going to get this negative to change that one to positive 3x squared. We then want to bring down the next term being 4x, for our multiplication, because we have two terms here. We're going to need two terms here. Now if we had three terms here, we'd have to bring down three terms. We have to make sure that we have the same number of terms as we have in our divisor, what we're dividing by. We need to make sure every time we have that many terms. Alright, so in this case we're taking 3x squared and dividing by x. So I'm going to get 3x here for the next term. Kind of repetitive, 3x. We're going to distribute that. So I get 3x squared plus 3x. We're going to subtract. So this goes away. Each time we do this, the first term should disappear because we picked the right term for that. We subtract here, we just get x. We bring down the last term, the negative 5, and we then divide this into the first term here. So we're going to have x divided by x, which is going to be 1. So we're going to have a plus 1 at the last term. If we multiply here, we're going to get x plus 1 over, and then we subtract. So we get negative 5 minus 1, which is negative 6. So there's our remainder here. So in this case we had a remainder. It wasn't a factor. It doesn't go in evenly. So what we would want to do here is put a minus 6 over x plus 1. So this would be our remainder. So this is what our solution to this long division. X cubed minus 3x squared plus 3x plus 1 minus 6 over x plus 1. So that's our solution to that division. Alright, continuing on with our next example. So our next example, it's going to be a little bit different in that we're not dividing by x, we're dividing by x squared. So this is going to look a little bit different in the long division, and as we have here, we have all terms listed, 2x to the fourth, so we have a fourth powered function. We have an x to the third, so we have an x to the third function. We have x squared, we have an x, we have no x's here. So we have all the terms. We don't have to add any kind of zero terms in this case. Alright, so we're going to write this out, x squared minus 1, and we're dividing it into 2x to the fourth minus 3x squared, or x cubed, plus 5x squared minus x plus 3. Alright, now we look at the first term here and we divide it out, so we have a 2x to the fourth divided by x squared. We're dividing by this term. In that case, we're going to get a 2x squared. So that's our first term that we're going to write up here, 2x squared. We're going to do that multiplication that we always do. So we're going to have a 2x to the fourth minus 2x squared. Now, that wouldn't go under this term because this is an x to the third power. So we need to actually move our second multiplication over here and write it underneath our x squared term, because that's what we're going to subtract it from. So we're going to subtract as we did before, but we don't have any x cubes to subtract. When we do this multiplication, we don't get any x cubes. So if we do this subtraction, this goes away, or I'm sorry, 5 minus negative 2, that's going to be 7x squared, because we're having a minus and negative, so that changes to plus. Now on our next term, we still have to worry about this term, so that term gets brought down. And then we also want to bring down this term just in case. We may need the next term. I don't know, let's just check to see what we have here. We always look at the next term, so we're going to do that next. We're going to take our 3x cubed, our negative 3x cubed, and divide it by x squared. So that's going to go in negative 3x times if we reduce. So that's our next term here in our problem. Our next term in our solution is going to be negative 3x. Distribute the negative 3x. We're going to get negative 3x cubed. And then minus 3x times negative 1 is just going to be positive 3x. Now we can't put it here because there isn't that's an x squared, so we need to put it over here, and we actually should have brought down this other term. We need to bring that term down so that we can combine them together. We kind of skip or jump over the middle term here. So we're going to subtract so that this becomes positive, it drops out. We're not subtracting anything here, so it's 7x squared. We subtract here, this changes this to minus. So we're going to have a minus 4x. Now we're going to bring our last term down just in case. Our last term is 3. So we're going to bring that down. We need to divide the first term by x squared. So we have 7x squared divided by x squared. So that's going to be 7. So our last term up here in our solution is 7. And we multiply, or we distribute that 7 over our two terms up here. We're going to get 7x squared. 7 times negative 1 is minus 7. We put it under the 3, not under the 4x, because we can't combine unlike terms. We subtract. This goes away. Nothing to subtract our 4x from. And we subtract here, we're going to get plus 10. Alright, so that means our remainder, well, because x squared doesn't go into x, this is going to be our remainder, negative 4x plus 10. So we're going to put a positive here because it's got two terms, so we're going to write negative 4x plus 10 here over x squared minus 1. Now I don't put a negative here because if I did, that would distribute over these two terms and make this one negative as well. We can't, and our solution has a positive 10, so we're not going to use, I usually use a plus and contain the sign up here. On my previous example, we only had one term on the top, so we could put that negative out front. So in this example, I used a negative out front without a plus because we only had one term. I just want to make sure that you understand when we have two terms, we have to, if the first sign is negative, we have to attach it there. We don't want to distribute this over that term unless we want to factor it out. If we can factor out, then that's going to be a minus 10. So if we put a minus here, we have to have a 4x minus 10. And both of those are correct. So basically, when I divide, I get 2x squared minus 3x plus 7 with a remainder of negative 4x plus 10 divided by x squared plus or minus 1.